Picking up right where we left off, number 10. A lot of people freak out with number 10 because there's decimals, right? Don't be scared. The calculator does all the hard work for you. So here's your equal sign. Your P is on the right side. You want to get the P by itself. But before even trying to get P by itself, you have to simplify each side. Now on the left side, it's just 210.5. There's nothing to do. There's no distributed property. There's no combining like terms. But on the right side, there is distributed property. So let's do that. 10 times 3P, that's 30P. 10 times 2, that's 20. Bring down the equal sign. Bring down 210.5. And there's your new equation. So let's continue solving. I want to get P by itself, so I need to get rid of the 20 by subtracting 20. 20 take away 20, 0, which do to one side, do to the other side, take away 20 over here. So 210.5 take away 20 on a calculator is 190.5 equals 30P. So we still need to get rid of the 30 in front of the P, which is being multiplied by the P. So you divide by 30 on a calculator. Again, 190.5 divided by 30 on a calculator. The answer is 6.35. So your answer is this. P equals 6.35. And I saw the test. There is going to be some that have a decimal answer just like this. And like I said, there's nothing hard about it because the calculator does all the work. Okay? Number 11. Number 11 has no decimals, but it has fractions, so it might be a little worse. Now, we all know that to get rid of fractions, we could multiply everything by the denominator of the fraction that you want to get rid of. Okay? So you could technically multiply by 4. It'll cancel it out. You have a 3W left over. But if you multiply by 4, you get 24. Multiply by 4, you get 40. Right here, multiply by 4, it does not cancel. So it might be a good idea to look at the 4 and the 6 and think about the LCD, the lowest common denominator. 12 is the lowest common denominator. Why? Because 4 could be changed to 12 by multiplying by 3, and 6 could be changed to 12 by multiplying by 2. So once you identify your LCD, then you multiply everything by that LCD. So put times 12 right next to this fraction. Put times 12 next to the 6. Put times 12 next to the 10. And times 12 next to the 5, 6. So by multiplying by your LCD, your least common denominator, everything will cancel out all at once. Check it out. 12 is on top over 4. That's really a 12 divided by 4. What's 12 divided by 4?
3.
So you have a 3 left over up on top. So what do we really have? We have 3 times 3 with a W. 3 times 3 is 9, of course, with the W. And then the minus 6 will become a minus 72 because 6 times 12 is 72. Bring down the equal sign. 12 times 10 is 120. And then right here, the 12 on top and the 6 on the bottom becomes a 2 up on top. So 2 times 5 is positive 10W. And there's your new equation without any fractions. We got rid of all fractions at the same time by thinking of the LCD. So let's continue solving. I want to get W by itself on one side. I'm going to subtract 9W to get rid of this one. Subtract 9W. My new equation, the negative 72 comes down. The equal sign comes down. The 120 comes down. And 10W take away 9W is positive 1W. Or just W. You don't need to put the 1. As a matter of fact, I want to erase the 1. There it is. It's just W. So here's my new equation. W is on the right side. Let's get rid of the 120 to get W by itself. So I want to get rid of the 120 by subtracting 120. What I do to one side, I do to the other side. Don't stress out. Use a calculator. 120, negative 120 minus 72. That's really going to be a 192, and it's going to be negative. Let me do that in black. 192 and negative equals W. So there's your answer. W equals negative 192. Is there other ways of doing it? Yes. Do you want to see the other ways?
No.
What? I mean, another option is to get rid of one fraction at a time. Do you guys want to see that?
Yes, sir. No.
So going back to this exact question, instead of using the LCD, what if you just got rid of one fraction at a time? You could do that. Or maybe even easier, maybe you see a negative 6 right here that could easily be moved over here. or maybe a 10 that could easily be moved over here, right? So this negative 6, you could go plus 6 to get rid of it, just to make the equation a little smaller, a little nicer. So let me rewrite everything. So the equation did become a little bit smaller, okay? So now I could worry about getting rid of fractions, and you might want to get rid of one fraction at a time, no problem. Which one do you want to get rid of, the 3/4 or the 5/6?
5/6.
We'll go for the 3/4. So let's multiply everything by 4. So check this out, times 4, times 4, times 4. Now, the 4 over 4 will cancel, so you will have a 3w left over equals 4 times 6, that's 4 times 10, plus 4 times 6, so that's 40 plus 24, that's 64. And of course, you could use a calculator. Now right here, the 4 and the 6, they don't cancel. They could be reduced, but I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to multiply 4 times 5 up on top. And 4 times 5 up on top is 20, and it's still over 6, and it still has a W and it still has a plus sign in front. Now right here, you could reduce 20 over 6. They're both even numbers. So you could change that to a 10 over 3. 20 over 6 reduces down to 10 over 3, and you can look at that new fraction, and now get rid of that new fraction by multiplying everything by what? By 3. So you could multiply by 3, multiply by 3, multiply by 3, and you will have 9w equals 60 times 3 is 180, plus 12 is 192, I believe. Check with the calculator. Am I good? Okay, the 3's cancel, and I have a plus 10w.
That's 189.
So I want to get w by itself on one side. I am going to subtract 10w. Subtract 10w. I will have negative w, or negative 1w, equals 192. So I want a positive w, not a negative. So multiply both sides by negative 1, and you will get your final answer of w being equal to negative 192. Same answer, right? Just a different way of doing it. I prefer the first way, where you think of the LCD. But if you like to get rid of one fraction at a time, you can do that. I would do the LCD. Multiply everything by 12. It gets rid of all fractions at once. Jumping to number 12. Number 12 is very interesting. A lot of people mess up on 12 because they want to get rid of the fraction, which is totally fine. And there's many ways of doing it. There's many roads to the same place. You could distribute the 1/2, or you could get rid of the 1/2 right from the start. So let's get rid of the 1/2 right from the start by multiplying everything by 2. Now, when I say multiply everything by 2, I'm talking about the 2 times 2, the fraction 1/2 times 2. And notice, I'm not going to multiply these guys by 2. I'm not. Why not? Because whatever you do to the 1/2, there's distributive property that's going on. So it's kind of like if you're doing it to these guys as well. So I am going to multiply the negative 1 times 2, and that'll give me my new equation. So it's kind of like if the parentheses here, protect these guys. So multiply by 2, multiply by 2. Don't mess with these guys because there's parentheses on whatever you do to this guy. It's like if you did it to those guys because of distributive property. And I'm going to have a new equation that reads 4. This cancels, so I have plus 1 times d minus 1, close parenthesis, equals negative 2. Now, normally, I see these parentheses and I need to distribute this value. But it's a positive 1, and if you multiply 1 times d, you still get d. 1 times negative 1, you still get negative 1, so nothing changes. The 4 comes down, the equal sign comes down, the negative 2 comes down. I have this new red equation I need to solve. I have 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. Out of those 3, I could combine the numbers with numbers. The 4, take away 1. I'm going to do this in my head. It's combining like terms. That's 3. So my new equation is d plus 3 equals negative 2. So for my final step, I am going to subtract 3, d equals negative 5. And that's my final answer for that one. So there are many different ways of doing this problem. Adrian just mentioned you could subtract 2 right from the start. Subtract 2, that would make this whole equation smaller and easier to work with. Yeah, so maybe you want to subtract 2 first. Subtract 2 over here, you get a negative 3, and it does make it easier to do. But you should get to the same place, the same answer, d equals negative 5. Moving on to number 13. solve the proportion. Again, it says solve. And what could we do on number 13? What do you do when you have a, cross multiply. Sas. So let's set this up. 7 times 48 equals 8 times C. Calculator time. So 7 times 48 is 336 on a calculator. 8 times C is 8C. So let's get rid of that C in front. We're going to divide by 8. Divide by 8 on the calculator. 336 divided by 8. We get 42. So 42 equals C. C equals 42. Moving on. Number 14. So right here, it's not an equation. There's not even any variables. You're not trying to get x by itself. There is no x. All you're doing is simplifying. And what does simplify mean? Distributed property, combining like terms, right? But there are no variables. So it's just a question of doing PEMDAS. So when you say PEMDAS, the first letter P represents parentheses. And we have parentheses right here and there. So what's inside the parenthesis? It's like zooming in. There's a 25 minus 5 squared. So inside the parentheses, do we subtract first or do exponents first? Exponents. So 5 squared is what? 25. So what we really have here, guys, is 25 take away 25. Are you with me?
Yes.
So let me rewrite the rest.
0.
I'm going to put the 2 out in the front, the plus, the 6, the parenthesis, 25 take away 25, the plus, the 5. So inside the parentheses, 25 take away 25, that's 0. So you really have 2 plus 6 times 0 plus 5. And of course, when you're faced with addition, multiplication, and addition, you're going to multiply first. And 6 times 0 is 0. So you really have 2 plus 0 plus 5. That's just 7. Done. Piece of cake. Moving on. Number 15. Once again, cross multiply. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, but there's a decimal. So what? Calculator doesn't work for you. Let's just set it up. 16 times 8.8 equals 4W, or W times 4. So on the calculator, 16 times 8.8, that equals 140.8. Equals 4 times W. So you want to get rid of the 4 times in front of the W. I'm going to divide by 4. Divide by 4 on the calculator. I'm going to do 140.8 divided by 4. Hit the equal button, and it'll tell me 35.2. 35.2. That's my W value. W equals 35.2. There will be decimals on the multiple choice answers on the midterm. Now, number 16 and 17, I do admit those are a little bit more fun because it tells you to solve, and solving is getting the variable by itself on one side, and they tell you for what variable to solve for. It says solve for y. So you want to get y by itself on one side. Where's y at? It's on the left side of the equal sign. It's definitely not by itself. So you want to get rid of the loner at the corner, and then you want to get rid of the multiplication of x. So Alan, what do I do first? That's right, subtract 7z. Cancels out. What you do to one side, you do to the other side.
You can't do that, so it's 8 over 7, negative 7.
So you're just going to rewrite it if you can't do it, right? So let's rewrite what we have. We have x times y equals 8 minus 7z.
And you want to get y by itself.
You want to get y by itself. So here's y. What do I do to get rid of this x?
Divide by itself.
Divide by x, that's right. It'll cancel out. What you do to one side, you do to the other side.
8 minus 7z equals, over x. So that's your answer.
That's your answer. Good job. Let's do one more, then we'll be done. Number 17, I want to get m by itself. Now this one's a little tricky because m is right here and it has a times 4 and a times n. So if this is the movie star, these guys are the movie star's buddy, this guy's a loner. Let's get rid of this guy first.
4p.
Subtract 4p. It'll be 0. Subtract 4p.
6k minus 4p.
Yeah, since you can't subtract it, you're going to rewrite it. Let's rewrite everything. 4 times m times n equals 6k minus 4p. Now, you didn't have to write this multiplication. I just wrote it down right there so you could see what's happening. How do I get rid of the multiplication of 4? Divide by 4. How do I get rid of the multiplication of n? I divide by n. So I'm going to get rid of both by doing the one step of dividing both sides by the entire 4n value. So what you do to one side, you do to the other side, divide by 4n over here. Now what that does is the 4 cancels with the 4 and the n cancels with the n, and you have m left over, and that's what they want you to solve for. They want you to solve for m. So you have m equals this stuff, 6k minus 4p over 4n.
That's easy.
I know this is a piece of cake.
You should be able to ace this midterm, guys. Now, I'm not going to explain the rest of these because 18 through 25 are exactly the same as 18 through 25 on the previous practice midterm.